the ones that stood out for me. I think he had so much charisma. I think at that time, I would definitely say he had the charisma going in against somebody like Bret. I think that's the one thing that, Bret would be honest enough to say that he never really was too great and comfortable at that time on the stick. But, Mr. Perfect, you could send him out and he would destroy guys on that mic. And the fact that he was often around Bobby Heenan as well, it was like, wow, two guys that can do it. It's incredible. But yeah, those vignettes he come in with and all the rest of it, absolutely incredible. Such funny stuff. And he was definitely tailor-made to, you couldn't have asked for a better guy to want to win that title from, to put you over, really, in many respects. There'd be few guys, I think, that were around at that time that, that could put on and keep up with someone like Bret at the time. And I think Perfect definitely hit that mark. Got some fun facts here now, and I know that everybody on our listeners always likes and enjoys listening to our fun facts when they come up. But here's this one so far. It's the first one of this line of Bret's, and it's that Titan moved into its new 9 million offices on Monday, which this is, by the way, this is in May of 91 here, and this is the Stamford offices that they still are at today. This is how much it cost, $9 million back then, and the offices include a Gold's Gym and a health and food restaurant. So they just moved in at that time. Matt, that building, the whole thing, it's very iconic now in Stamford. And of course, it's been shown up many a times. We've seen it in some of the Stone Cold stuff. We've seen it on Beyond the Mat. It's appeared very big on that, and that scene. World Wrestling Federation, one moment. World Wrestling Federation, one moment. That scene in Beyond the Mat, I always think of that when I think of the offices at Stamford. But yeah, the fact that they moved in, Matt, I mean, I guess it shows where WWF was at that time, that they were becoming and growing this huge company, and I'm guessing they could never have sort of believed just how big it was going to be. But Matt, for you, anything to throw into that with these offices, and do they mean anything to you? Is this somewhere you'd want to go? I never really thought about going there, but I mean, I know it's iconic in Stamford, but it's not something I'd particularly sought out to go and see.
Yeah, for me, there's not exactly anything in the vicinity that would draw me there as a tourist, but it definitely does have that iconic kind of feel about it. And like you said, we have seen it in many segments. I mean, for me, it's like the beginning of the old VHS, and even
DVDs, that's a good point.
When it'd be like, we would never do
yes,
anything,
I always do that. But, yeah,
the PG kind of thing, which they were so totally not PG about it. And even in more recent times, when we saw Brock Lesnar just turn up there, it's just been used in such a good way in many circumstances like that. But yeah, I don't think as a tourist I'd do that. I'd just much rather go to an actual event.
I'm gonna throw this out right away. That commercial you mentioned about that was always on the Attitude VHS videos. That is the best damn commercial the WWFE has ever done, in terms of just for the audience that are not even into wrestling. Like, it's so easy to get what was going on at that time and get people enticed. And yeah, that was one of the best adverts they ever shot, that one, without doubt. I know we mentioned it, I think, in one of our timelines about one of the guys that got injured doing one of those things. So go back and listen to that. But yeah, I definitely, that advert has to be one of the best ones I've seen that WWF have done, just for the more sort of casual fan that could get into and relate to that one. It's also worth pointing out that at this point, around this time, Mr. Perfect is missing some bookings because of an injury to his back. And I think we kind of, for those that have seen the DVD, would be familiar with this injury, Matt, that Mr. Perfect at the time was going through a really bad time with his back problems. And this is probably when he started to realise that, his time was almost as far as becoming, been as the style and everything. Although he never done a very good job at disguising it. His body started to take a toll on itself at this point. But he was going through some bad sort of back pains at the time, and of course he was the Intercontinental Champion. And it's also worth pointing out that the vignettes for Sid Justice started appearing on television in May as well. And of course, Sid, Matt, we do get like a lot of people enjoying Sid, and Sid and Vader are always the ones that I get lots of emails. Like, they've got some really hardcore fans for these guys. I guess there's not a great deal done about these guys, but we always get emails about them. But Sid Vicious was going to be coming in, and of course he would be teed up towards WrestleMania 8 in quite a big way going forward. So okay, the Wrestling Observer now, we're in June at this time. In the wake of the Tuesday afternoon press conference and a television appearance that night by none other than Hulk Hogan, which he basically appeared on a show, and Dave Meltzer reports it was nothing short of fraudulent. There has been a lot of skepticism brought out regarding Titan Sports' announcement that it would soon be testing its wrestlers for the use of anabolic steroids. Now, Matt, of course, this was becoming quite a big issue. We've spoke about this. We've touched on this a few times on the timelines because this always hits around these kind of years. But Bret as well kind of talks about this in his book. I'm just going to read a little segment out from this. He says, by mid-July here, the WWF Crisis was an interview that Hogan did in which he flat out lied and looked bad doing it. I was embarrassed hearing him say he'd never taken steroids except once for an injury. If he'd been honest, it's likely we'd never have heard another word about it. But now the media was all over Hogan, calling him a hypocrite because he had always preached to kids that they could be like him by saying their prayers, eating their vitamins, that whole 9 yards. Matt, this is not an interview I'm familiar with. I tried to look this up. I tried to see if it was on YouTube, the availability of it and all the rest of it. But, this time, Matt, the steroid thing, of course, steroids were legal at one point, then they become not legal. The whole kind of Cesarian, who was one of the doctors, he was getting investigated at the time. I mean, quite a bit of a nightmare was happening here for WWF and Vince McMahon in particular, and we've spoke about just how much of an impact that would make sort of, maybe 2 years down the line, I want to say around WrestleMania 9, how big of an impact that would be. But this is the first sort of stages of it. Just to touch on this subject briefly, Max, I don't know, that we'll probably get a time to talk about it ever again in another timeline, but the whole steroid issue, Matt, I mean, do you think if WWF were a little bit more honest, they might have got out of Dodge a little bit more, or do you think that they was always going to get into this dilemma and this was always going to be a problem at some point and it was only a matter of time? Kind of one of those things, I guess, if WWF was going to get big, that meant everyone more was going to see it. And if you've got someone like Hogan as the poster guy who's saying all these things, he's going to get looked at like they're going to have him under a microscope. Is that how you kind of see it? Or do you think there was ever a way that WWF could have handled it better?
Whereas, like you said, we have touched upon this numerous times in the past because it is just one of the biggest things that has ever happened in wrestling. Some scandal about it. But yeah, I'll have to agree with you. If they were a little bit more honest about it, then it might not have been blown out of proportion to something that it became. If they had said, that these people are more like characters, and then they take steroids because they're more like cartoon characters than actual real life people, which is pretty much like we had to wait, say another 5 or 6 years, and then it would all come out that this isn't sports, this is sports entertainment, and that what is actually going in the ring isn't going to be affected by steroids because
Sure.
everyone's on a equal playing field, whether they're taking them or not. You know, I think the things would have been a whole lot smoother.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I want to go push on a little bit more here, and Meltzer reports in the Wrestling Observer at the end of July here that Perfect is supposed to take a few months off after SummerSlam to let his back heal up. So at this point, Matt, everybody, the kind of wrestling dirt sheets, as we call them, they're already predicting that Bret will be going over here, I guess, because of this injury that's sort of come out, and you know, Kurt will be taking some time off. So I guess he sort of goes in as a sort of favourite. Also, Meltzer reports that Hogan is also taking time off after SummerSlam and won't return until late October because he's doing a movie. During the intermission here, WWF is only going to run one show per night, headlined by Warrior and Undertaker at the time, who is the group's hottest character. Yeah, that's where he's at. I wonder what film that was that he was going to shoot. What bad one was it? I wonder. That'll be the. I'll tell you. I'll put that out for our listeners there. Email us in. If you knew what one that was in 91 after SummerSlam. But yeah, I wonder what one that was. My God. Yeah, now I want to hit us up in August here. And Meltzer's reporting that Madison Square Garden, which of course will play host to this year's SummerSlam, is already sold out. So that's done pretty well. But yeah, you wouldn't expect anything less. Madison Square Garden was and still is very much, you know, when they do go to WWF sort of home, I guess, in many ways. Some notes on the Superstars tapings here, held on the 19th of the 8th in Rochester before 7,000 fans. Neither Mr. Perfect nor the Rockers appeared due to injuries, so one suspects that the Perfect versus Bret match won't be the classic that everybody wants it to be. This could just be a 1 minute match that will have a pointless DQ in it. So it's interesting here, Matt, that Mr. Perfect, he's not working house shows, he's not doing tapings of Superstars. He must have been pretty hurt, Matt, before going into this, and now of course people are expecting this is going to be nothing more than, you know, a couple of minutes match because this guy can't do anything at this point. I do remember Bret talking about this, Matt. Is there anything you remember? I don't know if Perfect spoke about this too much in his DVD. I cannot remember that far back, but is there anything you can vaguely remember about this injury that he had?
I do remember it kind of like, it was very apparent during the match that, you know, that his back was bothering him.
Mm-hmm.
And just the pace was so off in this match, you know, that Mr. Perfect was like working a much slower kind of pace compared to what you normally would see him in.
Yeah.
And I really can't blame him for the way, you know, the match ends as well. I mean, if your back is in that much pain, you really don't want to be.
No,
you don't want to be taking no sharpshooters or anything.
Worst scenario, isn't it? We've got another fun fact here, and exactly around this time in August of 91, Undertaker now has a Grim Reaper tattoo on his left forearm. So there you go, he's getting into character more there, Matt. Almost now. I've got a part here from Bret's book, and this is literally just the sort of build up towards this match with Mr. Perfect. He says, my matches with Kurt Hennig remind me of those Spy versus Spy cartoons in the Mad magazine. We were always incapable of having a bad match, and we had a similar look, except that Kurt's attire was a little bit more long and blue. He had the blonde and curly hair. Both of us were second generation wrestlers whose fathers were respected men and very tough businessmen as well. We shared an understanding of what it was like to fill their shoes. But until I saw Kurt in the locker room that night before the show on August the 26th, I'd been anxious. The rumour was that he wouldn't show because his back was too messed up. In fact, the injury was so bad that he'd been forced to be doing nothing all summer. but literally go fishing.